Welcome again to the K through 12 Revolution. I'm Gary Marvin Davison, and once again appreciate the camera work by Holly Hollister. I'd like to introduce you, first of all, to Dr. Luigi Lubonza, to my right here, who is here to tell us about a grave situation in her country, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is a show on education, and one of my messages over time is going to be that our students should have a great deal more information than they do about international situations. I dare say, for our students and many of you watching, if I say the Democratic Republic of Congo, there would be an absence of the level of knowledge that we would find ideal. So to know more about the world, to know more about situations across the globe is important when we make commitments to military action. When we send our daughters and our sons into conflict, we want to know why and where those conflicts are taking place. In the situation of the Democratic Republic of Congo, I hope that many of you have some broad knowledge that this was one of the places across the globe that was the subject of imperial interest on the part of European powers, in this case specifically Belgium. For about 20 years it was actually under the personal control of King Leopold II of Belgium. It was really his personal territory, and he exploited it terribly. A figure that I read, billions and billions of dollars that his family profited personally off of the tremendous mineral wealth which is in the Congo. At the time, the main interest was rubber, because the auto industry was on the throes of developing. And in the course of the early 20th century, that became a major goal, was to extract as much rubber on the plantations, exploiting the labor of the people in the Congo. Eventually, the exploitation got to a point where, in the early part of the 20th century, that was taken over by the Parliament of Belgium. And it was ruled until 1960 as the so-called Congo Free State. But the Congo got its independence in 1960. It had a number of names. At first it was the Democratic Republic of Congo. It had different names, but by 1971 it was called Zaire, which it was, as I understand it, down into the 1990s, at which time it reverted to the name Democratic Republic of Congo, which it has been known by now for 15 to 20 years. I think it's very important to know that during that time of rule by King Leopold II and by Belgium, the people in the Congo were exploited terribly on those plantations. Lots of violence. If people didn't cooperate or didn't want to work hard enough, many people died. And it's my impression when I read the material that people were just treated as things, not really human beings at all. They were just means to get at the rubber and the other vast resources that the Congo has. So in 1960, independence came. There was a guy by the name of Lumumba, who ruled for a while but was assassinated in 1961, and there were various kinds of political competitions and military competitions, and in 1965 Joseph Mobutu rose to power. That power was entrenched by 1971, and when the name became Zaire, and he ruled down until 1997. He was already beginning to lose his grip, and I think this is very important for you folks to understand, and then I want to turn it over to Dr. Lubonza. But the United States was very instrumental in supporting Mobutu as he confirmed his power in the 1970s and 1980s, because that was a part of the world, like so many others, that was important in the Cold War. Mobutu was by far not a Democrat. He was not for truly a democratic society, but he was anti-communist. And so the United States supported him, even though, like many other dictators across the world, he brutalized many of his people, or at least his military and paramilitary forces did. And if I say anything that's not correct, I'm sure you will correct me, but that's what I understand. So I think it's very important to understand that whether we're talking about the colonial imperial period or a period that the United States tacitly approved of, this violence does not come out of nowhere. Violence begets violence, and by the time we get to the situation that Dr. Mabonza is going to tell us about, there was a whole history of violence that served as a precedent for the horrendous situation about which she is going to tell us. So first of all, if you have anything to add or to correct about what I said, do you think, at least in broad strokes, that the information that I presented is correct?
Yes, it's correct.
I should tell you folks remarkably before we get going here that Dr. Mabonza has been in the United States for
9 months now.
9 months. Now listen to this. She did not know English when she arrived in the United States. So you can imagine the level of intelligence that you are witnessing here, because she is doing this interview in English. Think about that. Could you do that in Swahili 9 months after arriving in the Democratic Republic of Congo? So we applaud you and we praise you and we thank you for being here and admire your efforts and admire your linguistic ability in such a short time. So I would like for the folks, first of all, to know a little bit about your personal background, your family situation, the exact place in the Democratic Republic of Congo from which you came, and just something about your personal circumstances as you grew up as a young person in your country.
Thank you, Gary. I am from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and especially the Eastern Congo.
The eastern part of the country?
Yes. And I was born in a city called Bukavu.
Bukavu.
Bukavu, in South Kivu.
Okay.
And my father is a pastor, the senior pastor of one Pentecostal church. And my mother, she is a very lovely woman, and she works in the church too, even if she's not paid. She is the leader of the Department of Women in the church.
So I pledged that I would make sure that I repeated some of the things that you say so that people understand clearly. So her father is a Pentecostal minister in this location in the southern part. The southeast, would you describe it as the southeastern portion of the country?
Yes, southeast.
Yeah, the southeastern portion of the country. And she's talking about her marvelous mother, and you can see the admiration in her eyes, who is the head of the Department of Women within this church.
Yeah. And also, I have 9 siblings.
9 siblings?
Yes. My parents are married for 35 years now, and they had 9 kids from their marriage, and they adopt 1 kid, so we have 10 kids. And 4 of my siblings are married now, and they have 12 kids.
So that's a total of 10 kids, and where do you fit in there?
Yes, I'm the first one. I'm in the middle.
In the middle,
Yes.
okay.
And my family has today 28 people. A very big family and a lot of love and security. And also, I have very good memories of my childhood. I remember before the war when my father had his own business, and he was welcoming tourists in Congo so that they can see the beauty of my country. And I remember living with many of them in our house, and we spent very good time with them. And also, I remember the time we went on vacation in different villages in my country, like in Kaziba, Luinja, and those places are very, very insecure in this time, and you can't go there. But I remember the time we went there, we were climbing mountains, singing, and we met very, very nice people.
Were you touched at all by violence as you were growing up? In your own community, was it affected by violence at all?
No. In my community before the war, everybody was treating the neighbor as their own kids. I don't know how to explain that, but back home we treat the neighbor as ourselves. That was my community before the war.
And you helped me with this, but when she refers to the war, this is largely a situation that grew out of some of the pressures of the terrible war in Rwanda, about which movies have been made and now at least has some understanding in the United States. 1994 was the key year then. And this was between the Tutsis and the Hutus, and the Tutsis won the war and took over the government. And in the aftermath of that, Hutus went into the Democratic Republic of the Congo as a way to regroup and to stage their military reply to the Tutsis in power. And conversely, the government, now controlled by the Tutsis, also made forays into the Democratic Republic of Congo to try to root out the Hutus, who, it's a very complex situation, but had various kinds of support. So in this eastern part of Rwanda that Dr. Mabonza talks about, you have a number of different competing groups politically on one side or the other of this conflict that grows out of the Rwanda competition between the Tutsis and the Hutus. And then it's also complicated by the fabulous, fabulous mineral wealth of the Congo in cobalt, diamonds, this coltan, am I saying that correct, which is used in various kinds of electronic devices. So many, many other minerals, but it is probably the most mineral-rich place in the world. So this engendered this kind of competition, the war that you speak of was a combination of this competition for resources and then this political situation that had grown out of Rwanda. This was in the late 1990s. It continued into the early years of the first millennium of our current millennium, 21st century, and continues to this day. Although, something that I did not mention, there was briefly a rule by, you correct my French here, Laurent Desire Kabila. Is that pretty good? And then he was assassinated in 2001, and his son, Joseph Kabila, took over in 2001, and as I understand it, he is still the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So whatever military and political situation has unfolded since then has been under his stewardship. It's also my impression that although he does have control of the central government and fairly effective control, that all of these other groups competing for power complicate the situation, and that no one ever has full control over every area within the Democratic Republic of Congo. Does that help, do you think, clarify a few of these things for people? And if there's there's anything that you need to say further, I would appreciate it.
Before to talk about the situation, the security of my country, I want to say that officially the war is over in Congo, but we still have war at the Eastern Congo, another kind of war.
Do I have it right that it was 2007 that there was an official peace accord of some kind? Okay. So it's officially over, but still lots of competition. You know, and I interrupted your flow of your account of your personal situation too. We don't want to jump too far ahead because I do want people to understand your education and your own training as a physician. One thing I wanted to ask in that regard is, as I understand it, the Roman Catholic Church provides a lot of the education for young people in the Congo. Was your own elementary school and your own high school, were those Catholic schools, or what was your situation as a youth as far as education?
Yes, I did my study at one Catholic school called College Alpha-G.
Okay.
It's for Jesuit priests, and it's the best school of my city. And also I did my medical school at the University Evangelical in Africa for 7 years. And then I graduated from that university with a honor. So after that, I started to work at Fancy Hospital in the OPD department.
One of the things that I've wondered about as far as your own background, my figures here, let me see. The literacy rate, the composite literacy rate is about 67%, as I understand, but many more men than women are literate, and the education seems to be much better for males than females. So how did you rise to such heights as far as your education was concerned? How would you articulate and explain it?
I can say that first I want to say that in my country we don't have scholarships or any kind of financial aid from the government. So our parents pay for our education. That's why I'm very thankful to my parents because they helped me to be educated. It was very challenging. As you know, my country, most of people are poor people, and they are not able to afford to pay for schools and education. And even for me, it wasn't easy. And my parents did their best to send me to school. And regarding women and men in my country, most of the time, men are the ones who are sent to school. Because when you are not able to, you don't have, you are not able to pay for everybody. Most of the time, they take men to go to school and women to take care of the house. And I just say that I was blessed to have my parents. Yeah.
Well, and you've spoken of your wonderful mother. Do you think it is because of her intense interest in women's issues that you were so encouraged? Was your father also very encouraging of your education?
Yes. Those people are just my mother and my mentors. Every time my father was like, I want you to become a very big woman. Every time, even if yesterday he told me that. He's always encouraged me. In my country, normally after 18 years old, you must get married. But I'm still single. And I had my goals. And in the community, some people was like, you need to get married now, it's time, I think. But I had my parents who was encouraging me to continue with my education. And I work hard for that. And
Did you say it was at about age 18 that women are expected to get married? Yes. So this is a remarkable person, and she had remarkable support from her parents. And rather than do the traditional thing of get married in a traditional way at age 18, she persevered with her education, became a doctor. What is your specialty, or what was your particular training?
Normally, I'm a general practitioner.
Okay.
I don't have any specialty. But the situation of my country, I became a I had a specialty in vaginal surgeries because of what I'm going to talk about.
This is going to be very important. So she is a general practitioner, but she also has a specialty in vaginal surgeries. And this becomes very important in terms of the tale that this story that she's going to tell us. I know that you want to call attention to the Panzi, P-A-N-Z-I hospital. And is that in Kinshasa? Or?
No, in Bukavu, South Kivu.
Okay. In South Kivu.
Yes.
One of the provinces of Democratic Republic of Congo. And if you'd just like to tell us more about that, this is Dr. Denis Mukwege? Mukwege. Is that okay?
Yes.
Dr. Denis Mukwege, who apparently is a remarkable individual who really tries to attend to the women who have been abused in the way that we're going to have explained here. So if you'd like to tell us more about this hospital, Mr. Mukwege, and your own role in all of that, this is very important.
Panzi Hospital is a small hospital. It's not like hospital here in the United States. We have 4 main departments, but also we have one specialized department of women victims of rape. And this hospital was founded in 1999. And our directing doctor is called Dr. Denis Mukwege, and his nickname is the Repairer of Women.
So Dr. Mukwege is nicknamed the Repairer of Women. Right. Okay.
I started work there in 2012, in February, and I started working in the OBGYN department. After that, I started also to work in the mobile clinic, finding and treating women victims of rape in my country as part of the ongoing conflict. And I just want people to know that Dr. Denis Mukwege is a hero in my country because he saved many lives and he helped many women, and also he's advocating for Congolese women all over the world. And he was nominated Nobel Peace Prize 3 times. In 1998, in 2011, in 2013, and also this year he received the South Coast Prize.
How do you spell that?
South Coast?
Yes. Oh, South Coast? No, I don't know about that. Tell us about the South Coast Prize that Dr. Denis Mukwege won.
It's a European
It's sponsored by people in Europe and organized by people in Europe? Okay.
and Sweden.
Out of Sweden,
Yes.
specifically? Okay, so an award that comes out of Sweden and was bestowed upon Dr. Mukwege.
And also last February, he received the Hillary Clinton Award. And all that is regarding the work of treating women victims of rape.
So this is a doctor that she's describing who has garnered several awards, and he was nominated for the exalted Nobel Prize 3 times, and he has won these other awards. So he's internationally recognized for his work.
You did ask me about how I come to learn
Yes.
about all this situation. I just want to say first that I am a Congolese woman, and I was born in Congo. I spent my childhood in Congo, and the war started in 1998, and I lived there pretty all my life, and I went through all those situations, and I saw many things, many things. The war started, I was like 10 years old, and today I'm 30 years old.
Well, let's pause just a moment, and I think we're shortly here going to move into the main message that Dr. Mabonza has to deliver. So understand that her work has been out of this Panzi hospital run by this marvelous and internationally awarded doctor, Dr. Denis Mukwege. Dr. Mabonza has worked there. She's a specialist in vaginal surgery, and her services, unfortunately, have been needed many, many times. So I described the general situation in the eastern part of your country, and this terrible violence and the scramble for resources and the political competition. So now let's just move into the human element and tell the audience what you've told me in some detail about the level of brutality that has been perpetrated upon women in your country, not just by one group, but by the various contending forces. And one thing that she's going to tell us about, remarkable story, sad story, regrettable, is the involvement of United Nations peacekeeping forces who have themselves been perpetrators of rape against Congolese women. So if you would just move into the heart of your story and tell people what you think they need to know, I think we're to that point in the program.
Well, there is many things to. I want to say that even if officially the war is over in Congo, we still have the war in the eastern Congo. And today, just in my city in South Kivu, we have over 23 different groups of militias.
23 different militias.
Yes. And I don't know if you can imagine what kind of disorder we can have in that area. Everybody's making the law. Everybody, we have people killed. We have people raped, women raped. And they are recruiting children in the army and in different group of militias.
So 23 different militias recruiting children into the army. How young would some of these children be?
From 3 to 16.
3 years old.
Yes.
This is what astounded me when you first told me this story. And they actually have weapons put in their hands so that they learn to feel and even to fire these weapons. Okay.
And today we have like a statistic of more than 500,000 women raped since 1998. And sadly, my country is called today the capital of rape. And people who are doing those sexual abuse are people of our own government, our own army. We have those different group of militias and armed groups.
So you would have the official army operating out of Kinshasa originally under President Kabila. trying to instill order among these different militia groups. So these soldiers are perpetrating rapes. At the same time, members of the militia are perpetrating rapes. At the same time that the UN peacekeeping forces that are supposed to be there keeping order have become part of that whole scenario and are themselves perpetrating rape against Congolese women.
And we have strong proof of all those things. And sadly...
What is the nature of your proof? Because I think this is very important for people to know. What evidence has been accumulated by what sources in terms of documenting these rapes?
Yes, about the UN peacekeepers who are raping Congolese women. We have videos. I think I sent you the
Yes, you did.
And also we have testimony of women who was abused, talking about different group of people who did those bad things. And also we have people in the news. We have many things, many videos on YouTube. Many people publish documents about what is going on in the Eastern Congo. And sadly, we have a total impunity. When they find out that UN peacekeepers are raping Congolese women, those people who was identified doing that, they just asked them to go back in their countries. And they didn't do anything to them.
What countries would these be? So what Dr. Mubonza is telling us is that once people have been caught, identified for having perpetrated the rape, there's really no significant punishment except to leave the Democratic Republic of Congo to go back to their country. So I'd like a sampling here of what countries these might be.
The UN peacekeeper comes from all over the world.
All over the world from the UN, yeah. Every continent.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Working in that program, I learned many things. I heard about those things, but I saw it by myself. Because when you work in a mobile clinic, they can call the hospital and say, one group of militias just raped like 130 women in this area of the country. And we have to go there as the mobile clinic to look for those women. And in the program, in our program, we was taking with us just women raped who carry fistula. That was the hard part of my job, because I think that all women need help, but I need to just choose which one to take, which one has fistula to take with me and take her to my hospital so that she can be treated. And that was the hard part of what I was doing as a woman, especially as a woman, because I know that all those women are my sisters and brothers, and they need help, but I couldn't do anything for them. Even if today I continue to think about all those women who don't get to sleep.
So you have to make some hard decisions as to what women to help who need the help the most.
Yes, but it was a USAID program for just women who carry fistula.
Oh, who carry the fistula.
Yes. Because most of the time, it's not just a sexual abuse. After being abused, those people put different things in the vagina of women. They can shoot in the vagina, or they can put knives and stuff like that. That's why those women carry fistula. And in our program, we just take with us women who carry fistula.
Could you describe for those of us who are not as medically acute as you are, the nature of this fistula that forms and is the determination by which you serve those who need the greatest attention?
The nature of
of the fistula, yes.
Yes. First, I want to say that the fistula is a communication between two parts who doesn't communicate normally. And most of the time when they put a knife or something into the vagina of women, they create like a wall between the vagina and the bladder, so that the urine will pass every time through the vagina. And those women need to have reconstructive surgeries. And I want to say something like why the sexual abuse is considered to be a weapon of the war. Because most of the time when those people come in a house of somebody, they rape that woman in front of her husband and her kids. I think that you can imagine what kind of trauma you can have after that. That's why you will find most of Congolese men who saw that those kind of brutality are very traumatized. And I think they wasn't able to protect their own wives. How can they be able to protect all the nation?
So you're touching on some very human issues here, and I have two questions I want to ask you. Why do you think it is? What is the motivation on the part of UN peacekeeping forces, government forces, contending militias, these males, to perpetrate this level of violence on women? Why? What is in their heads when they do this? Can you get a grip on this?
That was my question, and still my question every time. But me, I think that they just want to make people feel like they are under power. You know, nobody is talking about the war we have at the Eastern Congo today. And that helped those people in different countries to continue to steal the mineral resources of Congo. But sadly, there is people who are dying every day because of that situation. And I think they know that after raping women, and everybody knows that the mother play a strong role to make the family stable.
Yes.
And after being raped, she feels like she doesn't mean anything. I remember most of my patients was like very hopeless. They just want to die. Some of them was committing suicide. And their husband was like, I couldn't protect any one person, somebody I love, my wife or my children, my child. How can I protect all the nation? I think those people just want to make people feel like they are under power so that they can continue to rape and to steal our mineral resources.
Of course, you speak to the nature of rape itself, which fundamentally is a crime of a demented person who is trying to exercise power. Sex is the means, but it's really not, it would seem, the motivation so much as to dominate. You know, whether it's a woman in an individual situation or maybe more broadly, as in the case in your country, where people are trying to establish power. The thought occurs to me then, if that's true, if they're doing this as a way to dominate, is there anything comparable that is done to dominate men in Eastern Congo, where there's an expression on the part of these contending militia groups or the government to bring that same kind of disgrace on men that occurs with women under the conditions of rape. So in other words, women are being used to express a will to dominate and to put fear into people. But is there anything comparable that is done to men? Or are women by far the main receivers of this level of violence, and are they the tools that are chosen?
I don't know if I understand your question, but I think that mostly women they use rape to rape women to make everybody feel like they are under power.
And that's my question, is I understand that perfectly, and it makes perfect sense. So, and I'm understanding that men would not be so much raped, but I'm just wondering if there's, why women must be the sole receivers of this level of violence, and if men are used in the same way, where you go into a village and you do something to the men to show that you're dominating them too, aside from their women. That's my question. Is there anything at all that's done at the level that's being carried out against women?
Yes, we have some cases of men being raped too. And also we have like every day, every single day, they kill people in my country. They can just come in the village and burn all the village. Or they can come and just massacre people. Or they can come in a house and kill the father in front of children.
The father?
Yes.
Okay.
Most of the time men are killed and women are raped. This is the situation of the Eastern Congo.
Would you say that men are killed and women are raped in equal numbers, or are women raped more than men are killed? Are women the major way that people are trying to exercise violence to put fear in the hearts of people?
Today at the Eastern Congo, it's more women raped instead of men killed. But if you take the whole story of the war of Congo, today we have over 5 million people killed in Congo.
Who have been killed over this period of time since the Civil War?
Yes.
So 5 million people have been killed since the middle 1990s when the war began. Now you mentioned a figure of 500,000 women who have been raped. Actually, I read a figure that says that up to 400,000 women a year are raped. So did you just want to present a conservative figure, which is daunting enough, or could we get at some of the numbers here? What is your exact understanding of how many women have been raped in the Congo?
Me, I think that the number we have in the statistic is less than the reality. Because every day, and the hospital is the center, the big center, where we take care of women victims of rape. And every day we have people coming, bringing those women raped from one part to another part.
Every single day, people arrive at Panzi
Hospital.
Panzi Hospital.
Yeah.
How many would you say arrive?
Like a day we have between 50 to 78 women.
50 to 78 people every day who have been raped,
Yes.
brought to this one hospital alone.
Yes.
Yes. So, do you have an estimate? So you've mentioned something that is always important to consider: the official figures versus what according to your best assessment, is the actual figure. What is the per year? Do you know per year what the official figure is? Okay. This is where I read it's up to 400,000. So we will explore these figures and try to get this information to you along the way, but we're talking about thousands of women over time who have been raped, and where you suspect that the actual figure is how many times more than the official figure, once we determine what that is? How many more times would you say the reality figure is over the official figure? Twice as many people actually raped than the official figure, 4 times as many?
I think 1.5 or up to 2
Okay.
times.
Okay. 1.5 to 2 times over the official figure. Okay.
And I want to say that one woman can be raped by 10 to 12 men the same day. And from those sexual abuse, we have many kids who are not registered because they don't know the father who was the father. And we have many kids who are not registered to be adopted.
So there's a problem that's developed in many children not being able to identify their fathers because of this situation of rampant rape. And you've told me of situations where a woman in a given instance, it's not all that atypical to experience rape by what, 7, 10?
I just want to say that it's sad and it's not fair to kill people just because of what they have. But in the same time, those people who work for the UN peacekeepers, who are supposed to protect Congolese people. Today we have the largest peacekeeping mission in the world with more than 20,000 UN troops. And most of the time we have this question, why does the war continue if you have all those people? But living with them, we find out that it's like they are on vacation. And sadly, they are raping women too in Congo.
Do you have any sense of the number of UN troops who have raped Congolese women? The number of rapes that have been perpetrated by UN peacekeepers? Do you have any sense at all of the numbers?
I think it's more than 200 women raped by.
More than 200?
Yes.
Over this period of time since 2005?
No, not 2005. I think since I am in this program.
Oh, so
those
2012?
women, yes.
Oh, so over 200 is your sense of the number of rapes that have been perpetrated by UN peacekeeping forces since you've been part of trying to deal with the situation, which was about 2012. Okay.
And also I want to say that, you know that my community is very poor with all those war. And when they came in our country, they had a lot of money. And easily they can give $100 or $20 to a young woman of 12 years old. And that's a lot of money for that girl. And we have many cases undocumented. Many cases undocumented. But those people who was strong enough to come to complain, we will have cases documented.
So you're talking about a situation there of prostitution, of give you nothing to give $50, $100, maybe even $200 to a 12-year-old girl whose family may need help and economic sustenance. Okay, so that's prostitution, but and that's regrettable, and that's its own terrible situation. But what we're focused on, especially in terms of the horrifying nature of this, is the rape itself, and that's the estimate of over 200 since 2012. This is the United States, and people would be interested to know, if you know, out of that 200, do you have any sense at all of how many would have been perpetrated by United States participants in that UN peacekeeping force?
I don't know. I don't have the exact.
Okay. But you have a sense that there has probably been participation from the United States peacekeeping forces. Okay. What else would you like to, what could people watching this program do to help address the situation beyond having some awareness via this program and other resources to which we can point them? What action would you like people to take?
I want to tell people that the war in Congo is different from the other war we have all over the world. Because it's not a ethnic conflict. It's not a religious conflict like Christian fighting with Muslim. No. But it's just people who are killed because they have something the world needs. And I think this can stop because it's made by people from outside of the country who want the mineral resources from Congo. I think if those countries can have good cooperation with my country, the war can stop in Congo. And what I'm doing here is to inform people. I want people to know what is going on in Congo. And also to tell other people about what they feel and what they know. Because I have a strong feeling that when you never know who gets the message, and all the decisions, most of them are taken here in the US. And I hope one day the message will reach those people who take all those big decisions and stop this. I think that 5 million people is just killed. It's just horrible. This is a massacre.
This is a massacre.
Yes.
5 million people.
I learned recently that the population of Minnesota is around 4 million people. And that shocked me. I was like, wow, it's like to come here and kill everybody. Today, Congo has a statistic of over 5 million killed. And also, I want people to talk about this and to think about those people who are doing their best to survive for now 20 years. It's easy to say Congo is the poorest country. How can people make money or work when they are kids?
So she's bringing this home in a way to which we can relate. She's saying this is roughly comparable to wiping out the state of Minnesota. 5 million people over a decade and a half or so. If you think about the Twin Cities, Minneapolis is about 350,000, St. Paul is 250,000, so that would wipe out those cities several times over. So this is a massacre. This is brutality. And your probably conservative estimate is that 500,000 rapes have taken place, and you yourself have witnessed 25 or so women a day coming into your hospital. And it's the communication that you are giving people is that it's your conviction that if the government of the United States, the government of France, the government of Sweden, I understand that Swedish and German corporate interests are particularly evident in the Congo. Those corporations are particularly evident in terms of extracting the mineral resources. But if these governments and these corporations spoke with a loud voice and said this must stop, it probably would stop.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So if they could do that, why not? That's your essential communication. And the question that we should always be asking everyone, if it can be done. Human beings are dying. women are being raped, children are not knowing who their fathers are, and they're seeing this done to their mothers, as husbands are seeing it done to their wives. If we don't do something about this sort of situation, then what are we doing with ourselves on this planet? Which is my, well, let me say first of all, I'm going to begin to wrap things up here. So is there anything else as we begin to tell the audience goodbye that, is there any final word that you would like to say to them?
I want everybody here in the U.S. to try to know where is the mineral in their devices are coming from. As Gary said, the coltan is used to make cell phones and computers and guns and many kind of electronic devices. So many people can say, how can I help Congo? First, you can just make sure you know where the mineral they use to make your cell phone is coming from. Because people are dying because of those things people use all the time.
So perhaps when you look at your watch or you look at your cell phone, you look at any of these electronic gadgets, probably these minerals from the Congo have had some part to play in the construction of those.
Yes, because 80% of the world's coltan comes from Congo.
80% of this mineral coltan comes from the Congo. Strong percentages are also present, as I mentioned, of copper and cobalt, diamonds, but she stresses coltan because this ends up in so many of our electronic gadgets. So to be aware of that, as we're enjoying these things, to go ahead and enjoy them, but to also be aware that someone has paid a terrible price for some of that wealth that goes into those items. Okay.
And also, as I'm here, I'm doing talking different places to inform people, and I would like anybody who has a place to invite me to share my story and to give a presentation so that people can know what is going on. I'm available for that because that's for what I'm here.
Well, I will try to do everything I can to help you get your message out, and when people contact me, I will try to provide necessary connections to you, and anything that I can do, you know that I want to. And I want to mention that my own email is GaryMarvinDavison@gmail.com. And for now, that's what I will give you, but for various reasons, I want you to have that so that you can get in touch with me. I want to say this, as you know, everything for me ultimately comes back to education. As Holly Hollister knows, I love music, I love to have a good time, I love to dance, I love to have a good time with my students, so that's part of life. But it's not all there is. You know, it's not all about watching The Voice or running off to the mall and getting the latest trendy things. You know, that's a part of it. But if we're on this planet to do something, it's to understand this marvelous thing that we call existence. It's to understand who August Wilson is and who Shakespeare is and what Einstein was doing when he was coming up with his theory of relativity. It's to understand the great world of knowledge and to understand the history of this marvelous globe, to understand the details of how much better would we be off if we knew that there was a great age of Islam under the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties in the centuries, say the 9th and the 10th and the 11th centuries, when Islam had a marvelous civilization. And that's what many groups are saying, you know, that we once had this civilization and we don't feel like people respect that. We might be able to put some of the Islamic movements across the globe in better context. Before we send our daughters and our sons to Iraq or to Afghanistan, We want to make sure that we know the history of involvement in those places by Russia, Great Britain, indeed the United States. And if we need to send troops and we need to deal with the situation, then do that, but let's understand. Let's have some sense of why we're doing this and what the historical challenges will be when we do that. So this is what we're dealing with here. This is a situation that grows out, in many ways, of European imperialism, a context of violence, a situation in which the United States encouraged a particular ruler, Mobutu, even though he was far from a Democrat, but served our purposes in the Cold War. So what I'm saying is, let's be well educated. Let's understand literature and natural science and history and mathematics and fine arts. And then we walk as informed people in this world, and that we're not just rushing off to malls or clicking on the television and keeping ourselves from things that we should know. Let's have our fun. Let's dance. Let's sing. But let's also accumulate some knowledge and have an understanding when there are people who are suffering and people who need our help and people who need us to be knowledgeable in thinking human beings. And that's the power of K through 12 education. That's why we need a revolution and why we should make it so, so much better. And I just want to thank you for contributing to our knowledge on this very specific incident. And I wish you all the best and have the strongest admiration for your goals and for your efforts. Thank you, everybody.